There's a place where teenagers disappear behind locked doors, and what happens to them there is something most people never see. Some kids go in for small mistakes, others for bigger ones. But once those doors close, they all face the same thing, a world that can break them in ways you wouldn't believe. And here's the strangest part, the system that's supposed to help them might actually be making everything worse. If you want to see what really happens behind those walls, hit that subscribe button right now. Now let's get into it. Let me tell you about Marcus. He was 15 when he got caught shoplifting a video game. First offense. The judge sent him to juvenile detention for 60 days. His mom thought he'd learn his lesson and come home better. But when Marcus walked out 2 months later, he wasn't the same kid. He barely talked. He had nightmares. And within 6 months, he was arrested again, this time for something much worse. Marcus isn't alone. 7 out of 10 kids who go to juvenile detention get arrested again within 3 years. Think about that. The place that's supposed to fix the problem is actually making it bigger. But why? To understand what's really happening, we need to go inside. Picture this. You're a teenager. Maybe you made a mistake. Maybe you were just in the wrong place at the wrong time. Suddenly you're standing in front of a building that looks like a prison. Because that's basically what it is. The doors lock behind you. The sound echoes down empty hallways. Someone takes your clothes, your phone, everything that connects you to your old life. They give you a uniform, a number, and now you're property of the state. Your first night, you're locked in a small room. Some kids call them cells. Some call them bedrooms. But there's no hiding what they really are. Concrete walls, a metal bed, a toilet right there in the corner where anyone walking by can see you. No privacy, no comfort. Just you and 4 cold walls. You can't sleep because someone is crying in the next room. Someone else is banging on their door, yelling to be let out. Guards walk by every few minutes, shining flashlights through the window in your door to make sure you're still there. As if you could go anywhere. That's night 1. But here's where things get really dark. Remember how I said most of these kids end up arrested again? Scientists studied this. They wanted to know why detention makes things worse instead of better. What they found was shocking. The longer a kid stays locked up, the more likely they are to commit crimes when they get out. It's like detention is teaching them to be criminals instead of teaching them to stop. But how? The answer is hidden in what happens during the day. Every morning a loud buzzer goes off at 6 o'clock. You have exactly 15 minutes to wake up, make your bed with perfect hospital corners, get dressed, and stand at your door waiting. If your bed isn't perfect, you get written up. If you're not ready on time, you get written up. Get written up enough times, and you lose privileges. Or worse, breakfast is in a cafeteria with guards watching your every move. You can't choose where to sit. You can't choose what to eat. You eat what they give you, sitting where they tell you, and you have exactly 20 minutes to finish. Talk too loud? Written up. Don't finish your food? Written up. Look at a guard the wrong way? You guessed it, written up. After breakfast, there's school. But it's not like regular school. Imagine sitting in a classroom where half the kids have given up. The teachers are often not real teachers, just people who needed a job. The books are old, sometimes from the 1990s. There's no sports, no art class, no music, just basic math and reading taught by people who barely want to be there. One kid told investigators, "I learned more about crime and detention than I ever knew on the streets." How was that possible? Here's the twisted part. When you lock up kids who made small mistakes with kids who made big mistakes, they all learn from each other. The kid who stole a candy bar is now sharing a lunch table with someone who knows how to break into cars. The kid who skipped school too many times is now talking to someone who deals drugs. It's like sending someone to crime school and expecting them to come out better. But education isn't even the scariest part. Let's talk about something called the hole. That's what kids call solitary confinement. It's a punishment inside the punishment, and it's used way more than you'd think. Imagine this: you talk back to a guard, or you refused to clean your room. Or maybe you just had a bad day, and your face looked angry. For this, they can put you in the hole. The hole is a room smaller than your bathroom. No windows, no books, no TV, no people. Just you, alone, for 23 hours a day. They slide food through a slot in the door. Once a day, they might let you out for 1 hour to walk in a tiny cage outside. Then it's back to the room. 1 hour of freedom. 23 hours of nothing. Now here's the truly shocking part. Half of all suicides in juvenile detention happen in solitary confinement. These are kids, teenagers who become so desperate, so hopeless, that they can't take it anymore. Doctors who study the brain say that solitary confinement does actual damage to a young person's mind. Kids start hearing voices. They see things that aren't there. They hurt themselves just to feel something. Some never fully recover. And this is happening in America right now to thousands of kids. Drop a comment below if you think solitary confinement should be banned for kids. And if you're not subscribed yet, hit that button. This story gets even darker. But here's the mystery that researchers couldn't figure out at first. Why do black and brown kids end up in these places way more than white kids? The numbers are stunning. A black teenager is over 5 times more likely to be locked up than a white teenager who committed the exact same crime. Native American kids? Almost 4 times more likely. At first, people thought maybe these kids were committing more crimes. But study after study proved that wasn't true. Kids of all races commit crimes at similar rates. The difference is what happens after they get caught. A white kid caught with marijuana might get a warning and a ride home to his parents. A black kid caught with the same amount might get arrested, charged, and sent to detention. Same crime, different outcome. One investigation found that in some cities, black kids were detained before trial for crimes that white kids were sent home for. The judge would let the white kid wait at home with his family until court. But the black kid? Locked up immediately, even though neither had been convicted yet. Why does this happen? Some of it is biased judges and police officers making assumptions about who's dangerous based on skin color. Some of it is money. Wealthier families can afford lawyers who know how to keep kids out of detention. Poor families can't. But here's the really messed up part. Once you're in the system, it's almost impossible to get out. Let me explain. You get arrested. You go to detention. You miss school. You fall behind in your classes. Maybe you lose your part-time job. Your friends move on without you. When you finally get released, you're already starting from behind. But it gets worse. Now you have a record. Some schools don't want you back. Many jobs won't hire you. Colleges might reject you. You're a teenager with a criminal record, trying to build a normal life in a world that keeps slamming doors in your face. So what do? Sometimes the only people who will accept you are other people with records. Other people who've been through the system. And slowly you get pulled back into the same world that got you arrested in the first place. The system creates what it claims to prevent. Now, remember those staff members I mentioned, the guards who watch over these kids? Here's something nobody talks about. Many of them are not trained to work with teenagers. Some of them are not trained in mental health. And some of them should never be around kids at all. In the past few years, investigation after investigation has uncovered abuse happening inside juvenile detention centers across America. Guards beating kids. Sexual assault. Staff members looking the other way while kids hurt each other. In Texas, investigators found that staff members were having sexual relationships with detained teens. In Florida, video footage showed guards body slamming a kid into the concrete. In North Carolina, undercover investigators discovered kids being choked, punched, and slammed against walls. These aren't isolated incidents. This is happening in state after state, facility after facility. And here's the most disturbing part. Most of this abuse never gets reported. Kids are scared that if they tell, it will get worse. Staff members protect each other. And the people who run these places often care more about avoiding bad publicity than protecting the children in their care. One former detention officer told reporters, "We were trained to control inmates, not help kids." Think about that. These are children, teenagers who made mistakes, and they're being treated like dangerous criminals by people who see them as problems to be managed, not people to be helped. But what about the kids who didn't even do anything wrong? Here's something that will blow your mind. Some kids in juvenile detention haven't been convicted of any crime. They're just waiting for their trial, sometimes for months. Imagine being 15 years old, arrested for something you didn't do, and spending 6 months locked up waiting to prove your innocence. You miss half a school year, your friends forget about you, your family struggles without you, and then, finally, you go to court and the judge says, "Not guilty." You're free to go. Great, right? Except you just lost 6 months of your life. 6 months you can never get back. And for what? This is called pretrial detention, and it happens to thousands of kids every year. The theory is that they might be dangerous, or they might run away before trial. But research shows that most of these kids are not dangerous and would not run. They're just poor. Their families can't afford bail. Rich kids go home. Poor kids stay locked up. Same accusation? Different treatment? Are you starting to see the pattern? Everything about this system is backwards. It takes kids who made mistakes and makes them worse. It locks up poor kids and lets rich kids go. It harms kids instead of helping them. And the really crazy part? Everyone knows it's broken, but it keeps happening anyway. Why? Part of the answer is money. Yes, money. It costs about $240 per day to keep one kid in juvenile detention. Per day, that's over $7,000 a month. For one kid. Where does that money go? To the companies that run the facilities, to the staff who work there, to the system that keeps itself alive. And here's the kicker. There are programs that cost a fraction of that amount and actually work better. Programs where kids stay home with their families, go to counseling, do community service, and learn real skills. These programs cost about $75 a day, and kids who go through them are way less likely to get arrested again. So we have a choice. Spend more money on a system that makes things worse, or spend less money on programs that actually work. Guess which one most places choose? The expensive, broken system wins almost every time. Why? Because changing the system is hard. Because people are afraid. Because some folks believe kids need to be punished, even if that punishment destroys their future. But there's another reason, too. And this one might be the most important. Most people have no idea what's really happening inside these places. The doors are locked. The kids can't speak out. The staff won't tell the truth. And society just assumes everything is fine until something goes wrong, until the kid dies, until the scandal breaks, until someone finally pays attention. That's starting to happen now. Slowly, people are waking up to the truth. Journalists are investigating. Families are fighting back. Some states are actually changing their laws. But there's still so much you don't know. So many secrets still hidden behind those locked doors. In the next part of this story, we're going deeper. We're going to talk about the kids who don't survive the system. The places where abuse isn't just common, it's the rule. And the shocking truth about who's really getting rich off locking up children. Because what you've heard so far, that's just the beginning. There's a secret that the juvenile detention system doesn't want you to know. Some kids never make it out alive. I'm not talking about kids who die years later. I'm talking about teenagers who walk into these facilities healthy and come out in body bags. And when it happens, the system has become very good at making it disappear. Let me tell you about a kid named Elord. He was 17 years old when he was sent to a detention center in Florida for a minor offense. He had asthma. His family made sure the facility knew about his medical condition. They sent his inhaler. They filled out all the forms. 3 days later, Elord couldn't breathe. He begged the guards for help. They ignored him. He collapsed on the floor of his cell, gasping for air. The guards thought he was faking it. By the time they realized he wasn't, it was too late. Elord died on the floor, alone, while guards stood outside his door. The facility said it was a tragic accident. An investigation found that staff members had falsified medical records. They lied about checking on him. They destroyed evidence. And here's the really sick part. Most of them kept their jobs. Elord's story isn't unique. Across the country, kids are dying in juvenile detention from medical neglect, suicide, violence, and staff abuse. But most of these deaths never make the news. Facilities settle with families quietly, making them sign agreements to never talk about what happened. The truth gets buried along with the children. One report found that in a single state, over a 10-year period, more than 30 kids died in juvenile facilities. 30 children, some from suicide, some from being restrained by staff, some from medical neglect, some from being beaten by other inmates while guards looked the other way. 30 families destroyed, 30 lives ended. And most people never heard about any of it. But here's what really keeps me up at night. For every kid who dies, there are hundreds more being damaged in ways you can't see. Let's talk about what detention does to a teenager's mind. Scientists have discovered that the teenage brain is still developing. The part that controls decision-making, impulse control, and understanding consequences, that part doesn't fully develop until someone is in their mid-20s. This means teenagers literally can't think like adults. Their brains are wired to take risks, to react emotionally, to make mistakes. It's not an excuse, it's biology. Now imagine taking that still developing brain and putting it in a traumatic environment. Isolation, violence, fear, constant stress, no safety, no love, no hope. What happens to that brain? It gets damaged, sometimes permanently. Studies using brain scans have shown that kids who spend time in detention actually have changes in their brain structure. The parts responsible for emotional control shrink. The parts responsible for fear and anxiety grow larger. Their brains literally rewire themselves to survive in a hostile environment. And then we release them back into normal society and expect them to just be fine. One neuroscientist explained it like this: we're taking vulnerable brains at the most critical period of development and exposing them to trauma. Then we act surprised when they can't function normally afterward. It's like breaking someone's legs and then punishing them for not being able to run. But some people might be thinking, well, these kids broke the law. They need to face consequences. Fair point. Let's talk about what these kids actually did to end up locked up. Here's something that will shock you. A huge number of kids in detention aren't there for violent crimes. They're there for things like skipping school, breaking curfew, running away from home, or violating probation by doing something like missing a meeting with their probation officer. These are called status offenses, things that are only illegal because you're a minor. An adult who stays out past midnight isn't breaking the law, but a kid doing the same thing can end up in detention. One investigation found a girl who was locked up for over a year for repeatedly running away from an abusive foster home. Read that again. She was being abused, so she ran away to protect herself, and the system punished her for it by locking her up. Meanwhile, the people abusing her faced no consequences. Another kid was detained for months because he missed 3 appointments with his probation officer. Why did he miss them? Because his mom couldn't get off work to drive him, and they didn't have a car. He didn't commit a new crime. He just didn't have transportation. The system punished poverty and called it justice. And here's where things get really twisted. Once you're in detention for something small, it's incredibly easy to get stuck there for something that happens inside. Let me explain how this works. You're a kid locked up for shoplifting. You're scared, angry, and confused. One day a guard tells you to do something, and you talk back. That's called disrespect to authority. You get more time added to your sentence. A few days later, you get into an argument with another kid. That's threatening behavior. More time gets added. You refuse to go to your cell when ordered because you're having a mental breakdown. That's failure to comply. Even more time. Suddenly your 60-day sentence for shoplifting has turned into 6 months because of things that happened while you were locked up. Things that never would have happened if you weren't there in the first place. The system creates its own reasons to keep you, and some facilities are worse than others. Way worse. There are juvenile detention centers in America that are basically torture chambers. Places where abuse isn't an exception. It's the standard operating procedure. Investigators have found facilities where kids are routinely pepper sprayed for minor rule violations, forced to sleep on concrete floors, denied food as punishment, locked in pitch-black rooms for days, physically beaten by staff members, sexually assaulted, and threatened to stay quiet. In one facility, undercover investigators found that staff members were running a fight club. They would force kids to fight each other for their entertainment. If a kid refused to fight, they'd get beaten by the staff instead. In another facility, kids were being locked in their cells for 23 hours a day, every day, for months. No school, no recreation, no human contact except when food was shoved through a slot in the door. Some of these kids were as young as 13. When these places get exposed, you know what happens? Sometimes they get shut down. More often, they just get renamed, reorganized, and reopened under new management. Different name. Same abuse. Now here's a question nobody wants to answer. If detention is so harmful, why do we keep using it? The answer is complicated, but a big part of it comes down to fear and money. Fear first. Politicians are terrified of being called soft on crime. If they support alternatives to detention, and then one kid commits a serious crime, they'll be blamed. So they take the safe route politically. Lock everyone up and look tough. But there's also money involved. Big money. Some juvenile detention facilities are run by private companies, corporations that make profit from locking up kids. The more kids they have, the more money they make. They get paid per kid, per day, by the government. Think about the incentive structure there. These companies make more money when more kids are locked up for longer periods of time. Do you think they're motivated to help kids get better and leave, or to keep beds filled? One investigation found that private detention companies were lobbying state governments to pass harsher laws that would send more kids to their facilities. They were literally trying to create more customers. It's not about rehabilitation. It's about profit. And even in government-run facilities, there's a money problem. These places employ thousands of people guards, administrators, counselors, maintenance workers. Entire towns sometimes depend on the local detention center for jobs. Closing a facility means people lose their paychecks. So even when everyone agrees that a facility is harmful and should be shut down, there's massive resistance because of the economic impact. We've built an entire industry around locking up children. And industries don't shut themselves down, no matter how much harm they cause. But here's the thing that gives me hope. Some places are proving there's a better way. There are cities and states that have dramatically reduced the number of kids they lock up. And guess what happened? Youth crime didn't explode. Society didn't collapse. In fact, in many cases, things got better. How did they do it? They invested in programs that actually work. Instead of locking kids up, they provided intensive counseling and therapy, connected families with support services, used mentors from the community, required kids to make amends to victims, offered job training and education programs, and kept kids in school and connected to positive activities. These programs cost way less than detention, and kids who go through them are much less likely to commit crimes again. In one city, they shut down their main juvenile detention center entirely. Everyone predicted chaos. Instead, youth crime dropped by 30% over the next few years. Why? Because they stopped teaching kids how to be criminals and started teaching them how to be successful. But these success stories don't get much attention. They're not dramatic. There's no scary news story. There's just quiet progress, kids staying out of trouble, going to school, getting jobs, building normal lives. That doesn't sell newspapers or get clicks. So most people never hear about it. Meanwhile, the detention centers keep operating. The abuse continues, more kids get damaged, more families get destroyed, and the cycle keeps spinning unless someone stops it. Here's something important you need to understand. The kids in these facilities aren't monsters. They're not evil. Most of them are just teenagers who made bad choices, or grew up in bad situations, or got caught up in circumstances beyond their control. Many of them have been abused at home. Many have witnessed violence. Many have untreated mental health issues or learning disabilities. Some are homeless. Some are trying to survive in neighborhoods where crime is the only option they see. And instead of helping them, we lock them in cages and wonder why they don't come out better. One kid who spent 2 years in detention said something that stuck with me. They treated us like animals and then acted surprised when we started acting like animals. That's the truth nobody wants to face. We create the problem we claim to be solving. So what's the answer? Some people think we should just build better detention centers, make them cleaner, safer, with better staff and programs. And sure, that would be an improvement. But here's what the research clearly shows. Even the best detention center is still damaging. Even when kids aren't being abused, even when they're getting therapy and education, the very act of locking them up and taking away their freedom causes harm that can last a lifetime. The answer isn't better cages. It's fewer cages. We need to reserve detention for the small number of kids who are genuinely dangerous and can't safely remain in the community. For everyone else, the vast majority, we need alternatives that actually work. This isn't about being soft. It's about being smart. It's about doing what actually makes communities safer, instead of what just makes us feel like we're being tough. Because here's the reality. Every kid we lock up unnecessarily is a kid we're making more likely to commit crimes in the future. We're creating the next generation of criminals with our own hands, and then blaming them for it. The system is broken. Everyone knows it. The question is, what are we going to do about it? Some states are starting to change. They're closing facilities. They're investing in alternatives. They're raising the age at which kids can be tried as adults. They're banning solitary confinement for juveniles. They're requiring better training for staff. They're holding facilities accountable for abuse. It's not happening fast enough, and it's not happening everywhere. But it's happening. And it's happening because people are finally paying attention, because journalists are investigating, because families are speaking out, because people like you are learning the truth. That's why stories like this matter, because most of what happens behind those locked doors stays hidden. The kids can't speak for themselves. They're literally locked away from society. The staff won't tell the truth because they're protecting themselves or their jobs. And the system wants to keep operating in the shadows where nobody can see what's really going on. But when the light shines in, when people see the truth, things can change. Every major reform in juvenile justice has come after public outrage over abuse or deaths. Every time someone pulls back the curtain and shows people what's really happening, there's a moment where change becomes possible. We're in one of those moments right now. The question is whether we'll do something about it, or whether we'll let the system keep grinding up children and spitting out damaged adults who then damage others. Because that's what's really at stake here. It's not just about the kids in detention right now. It's about the adults they're going to become, the parents they're going to be, the workers, neighbors, and community members they're going to be. We're shaping the future right now with how we treat these kids. And based on what we're doing, we're creating a pretty dark future. But it doesn't have to be that way. The truth is out there now. You know what's happening. You know the system is broken. You know kids are being damaged and killed by a system that claims to help them. The question is, what will you do with this knowledge? Will you forget about it tomorrow? Will you assume someone else will fix it? Or will you be part of the solution? Because change doesn't happen by itself. It happens when enough people decide they've had enough. When enough people say, this is wrong and we need to do better. Those kids behind locked doors, they're counting on us. They can't fight for themselves. They need people on the outside who care enough to demand change. Every kid locked up for a minor offense. Every teenager sitting in solitary confinement right now, losing their mind. Every child being abused by the people who are supposed to protect them. They need you to care. They need you to speak up. They need you to be part of making this better. Because if we don't fix this, the next kid who gets ground up by this broken system could be someone, could be someone you love. Could be someone who didn't deserve what happened to them, but got caught in a machine that destroys people and calls it justice. The system is broken, but it's not unfixable. It starts with people knowing the truth. And now you know.